Good morning, everybody. Very often when I'm not used to standing behind one of these either, so I'll try my best. I'm very fortunate to have spoken at lots of universities, with the Home Office, working with the College of Policing, all around innovation, particularly innovation within policing. I always start the conversation normally by introducing myself as not an academic. And one of the reasons I do that, just to prove, is for anybody wondering, the method and practice of teaching, especially as an academic subject or theoretical concept, that's the Google definition of pedagogy, or whatever it was that we had there. Just something in which I hope highlights my constant learning when working in this field, because I think it's really important that we broaden the horizons of our staff and our officers, particularly around some of the work that's going on, both nationally and internationally. Just to give you a brief personal history, I left school at 14 years old, not by choice. Then became a chaplain for a number of years, and then decided that I wanted to be a police officer, and joined Lancashire Constabulary as a police officer in 2001 and served 16 years as a PC and then a sergeant. And during that time, did a number of projects within policing, which I suppose were a bit different at the time. One example being 2008, we were working with a group in the community around young people, the families, reducing antisocial behaviour, looking at entrance into the criminal justice system. And we really started making some groundwork. And nationally, the austerity came in. Every force had to look at what they do and how they do it. And as a result of that, I remember having a conversation with our chief superintendent at the time, who said, that work that you're doing over there, we're no longer going to do that. And I said, I didn't agree with it. And they said, fine, do what you want, but you're not doing it in police time. So we started to think creatively and think differently about how we could continue doing the work that we did. And we came up with the concept of forming a charity, which is what we did in the community. Got some influential members of the community to become trustees. Very fortunately, shortly after that, we got just over £1.5 million from the National Lottery to fund the project. And then I was called back to the Chief Superintendent's office, who asked the question, what are we going to do with this money? At which point I had to explain to him that it wasn't his money, it wasn't the police's money, and in fact it was the community's money. And so, yeah. I then took a career break. Took a career break from policing for just shy of 2 years, really. I became a consultant in, I suppose you would call it now, innovation. At the time, it was about thinking differently about community work, working with charities, with the public services, locally, around how can we think differently about how we deliver some of these services. And then, by chance, I went back into the organisation, was given the responsibility for looking at collaboration particularly, and out of that was born innovation. So hopefully that's just a very quick fire introduction as to where I come from. I'm no longer a police officer. I resigned as a police officer, made a very tough decision to resign in 2017, and came back into Lancashire Constabulary as Innovation Manager, which is a great title. However, hopefully you'll see is a fun, challenging, and often difficult task as well. So that's a little bit about me. What I won't be mentioning is PQF. I'm not an L&D professional. What I'm hoping to do today is give you an overall view of innovation in Lancashire Constabulary and where we've got up to in the last 18 months. Particularly. I'm hoping that all L&D professionals in here and those from universities can take some nuggets from this and see how innovation can be applied within policing. We are right at the beginning of this journey in policing on what I would call embracing innovation and what it means and what it's about. So just as innovation is, I describe innovation as the golden thread that runs through every department within policing, or it should be. I very much hope that L&D sits side by side for that because of the consequences and the change that comes out through innovation. So just finally, my focus is on delivery, very much around applied learning, something we often use is the term use first and evaluate later. What I want to see, and it's refreshing to hear people talking about producing products, is very much around what are the products that we are producing for our staff, what are the things that we are delivering and landing that allow our staff to see the difference and the change that is happening with the way in which they do their work on an everyday basis, very much focused around front line. Some of the things which we do, which I'll show you today, aren't always at the front line, but they are changing how people are doing things on the front line particularly. So I will move swiftly on then. So just a little bit about innovation itself. I was very fortunate to spend some time with Cranfield University, very much looking at innovation and strategic innovation, management and implementation particularly. They define, one of the first things they say is that diverse views on innovation arising from different functional perspectives will hinder the implementation of an innovation strategy. Very clear to see within our organisation, nationally, if you say the word innovation, you will probably get about 10, 15, 20 different views of what that actually means. I'm not stood here to say that one definition is right or wrong, and I think very much localised, it can mean something very different as well. So that was very much my starting point. So Nesta define innovation as the implementation of a new or significantly improved product or process, new marketing method or new organisational method in business practice, workplace organisation or external relations. Very long-winded. I would like to welcome anybody to try and land some of that with our officers and say, just read that, there you go, there's your definition of innovation. I guarantee it won't go very far. One of my influences comes very much from somebody called Dr. Max McEwen. I would recommend reading his books on strategy and reading his books on innovation. Very interesting stuff. He describes innovation as practical creativity. Somebody said blue sky thinking before. I think if I went into my work and said innovation is just practical creativity, I would be accused of being a blue sky thinker. Would get all the pink and fluffy quotes that we like to get in our organisations as well. So what I've been trying to do is find somewhere in between. Something that will land with our officers and our staff, but also something that the organisation understands. This is the only diagram that I'll use today, I promise. This is what's called the Pentathlon Framework, for those who don't know it. This is very much the basis on where I started, looking at how do we do innovation. What this tells us is the 5 key components to innovation in our organisation, and it really doesn't matter whether you're working in L&D, digital, or even in firearms. If you want to have innovation, this is the starting point for me in Lancashire on how we do that. And so what this tells us is, first and foremost, we need a place for ideas to come into. That place needs to be one place. We need to then look at the prioritisation of those ideas and exploring how do we prioritise those ideas. So what we say is that actually the prioritisation needs to look both up at the innovation strategy, the strategy of the organisation, how are we communicating, what technology do we have, what are our objectives as an organisation, and what measures do we have in place for those ideas, but also the people in the organisation, something I'll touch upon at the end. Our culture. Police culture is probably one of its own, as we can probably all agree. What are the motivations for our staff and also appraisals? So when we start looking at things like reward and recognition to our staff as well. And all those need to make sure that they are part of how we are prioritising the ideas that come from our staff, that come from our departments, into how we want to go forward with some of those ideas. And then finally, implementation. Do we have the structure, do we have the infrastructure and the mechanism within our organisation to implement some of these ideas? There is absolutely no point in saying to all of our staff, give us your best ideas. Tell us how we can make your life easier. And then those ideas just being sat in a filing cabinet on somebody's desk are just being in the too hard to do box. And so we've done that very much in Lancashire, which I'll hopefully touch upon as we go through, but by all means do ask me at the end. So the innovation strategy for Lancashire Constabulary launched this year, very much focuses around our 5 key areas for the next few years. Those are digital services, workforce capabilities, communities, leadership and ownership, and strategic partnerships and income generation. And I will touch upon those as we go through. Just in the right-hand corner there is our buzzometer. I'm sure forces have something similar, satisfaction from our staff around how they feel about the organisation. And very fortunately in Lancashire, we're working on fertile ground. Our staff told us last year that they have confidence in submitting ideas to their line manager. They also told us that they have confidence in their team's ability to implement change and the support that they get from their team in doing so. And we're introducing more questions this year to our staff, very much focused around innovation. So that's just to kind of highlight we're in a fortunate place. In the bottom right-hand corner there is the Digital Innovation Delivery Plan. The reason I bring that up is you'll see digital services shortly. Innovation can't own and can't implement everything that we do in our organisation. However, it does have a role to play. One of the ways in which I describe innovation in Lancashire Constabulary is that it works as an internal consultancy to our departments within the rest of the organisation. Many people in our organisation will tell you that the people doing the work are the best ones to implement change. They're also the ones with the best ideas. What we seek to do in innovation is we support those people by giving them the tools, giving them the space and the time to be able to innovate and supporting them with the infrastructure that we talked about before to enable that change to happen. And so our digital innovation strategy is owned by Chief Inspector Dave Hannon, who I work with closely, and what we did was as soon as the digital strategy was launched, we sat down and we went through the Digital Innovation Delivery Plan, which is how, in which areas of that strategy will innovation support the digital strategy in coming to life in Lancashire. I'm not going to talk through all of these, but essentially these are the areas in which we are within our strategy for innovation. So first of all, our purpose. The way I've defined it is that we are consistently thinking differently about how we do business, integrating an innovative mindset across our workforce and implementing the very best ideas for change. So staff are very clear upon why we have innovation within our organisation and what is the objective of that. It's to support and implement new ideas from our communities, our staff and our partners to deliver outstanding value for money services in Lancashire. So the areas in which we have digital services, support public contact and engagement between police and public through digital platforms, maximising opportunities to develop and enhance digital capabilities, and supporting the creation of a digitally enabled workforce down at the bottom. Just 3 that I want to pick out for you there, and the areas which we're working on for that. And hopefully you'll see as we move through how we're doing some of that. Leadership and ownership, we will touch upon that just right at the end again, but very much around creating opportunities for staff to lead and implement innovation projects, but also evidence and share best practice or good practice across the organisation where innovation is owned and implemented by staff themselves, closely linked with PDR and career progression. Workforce capabilities. By the way, if anybody wants copies of these afterwards, I'm more than happy for these slides to be shared. Working closely with public services and higher education partners to maximise opportunities for continuous improvement and shared learning for all staff, and enabling our staff to share ideas for improvement by creating a clear route for them to share ideas that will be considered through the Transformation Board. Our community is really important. One of the things in which we do, we all as police forces consult with our communities. We tell them what we're doing, we explain why we're doing it, we listen to their needs as communities in their local area, but how much are we involving them in our innovation efforts? How much, where can the community go to now, physically or digitally, to be able to give us some ideas of how they would improve things? To be able to say, do you know what, I've got this problem at the end of my street, and I went on holiday last week and I saw this street, and they did this with CCTV or cameras or lighting or whatever it may be. Just one place that somebody who might not be able to make a meeting, somebody who might not be part of the local community group, who just has that one idea that thinks that might be useful for Lancashire Constabulary or for GMP. And so that's one of the things I'm really keen that we increase through this strategy. And finally, strategic partnerships and income generation. It is an area in which we are still right at the beginning of. We do a lot of partnerships in very different models. We do collaborations, we do strategic partnerships, we do knowledge exchange partnerships. Very much through innovation, we are looking at what is the value of those partnerships to our organisation, particularly? What is the value of those partnerships to our communities? And are we, as a public service, and this is where we go into the realms of sometimes quite contentious discussions that we have internally around, are we maximising the value of what we bring to the table in that relationship as well? And I can give you a couple of examples around that. And so that last one is to explore and exploit opportunities to attract investment for our resources and assets to help Lancashire Constabulary and partners to deliver improved public services. We are on a short, medium, long-term journey. At the moment, we're still in the area where we're embedding innovation within the organisation as a consideration for all the change that happens. So I'm making sure that every board that we have, every meeting that takes place, we're saying, where's the innovation in this idea? Where's the innovation in this process? Where's the innovation in this change? Have we considered alternatives? Have we got some creativity around how we're doing things? And that's really important because that will start to change people's mindset around the fact that the organisation wants and welcomes innovation, which is a whole other conversation. Medium-term, work with business leads, partners and grant-funded bodies to attract investment across key areas of the business. I'll talk a little bit about how we've done that already. And then beyond that, develop an open innovation platform to research and identify best practice when engaging with strategic partners by opening up problem solving at the earliest opportunity. First time that word's appeared on here, problem solving. We keep talking about things like problem-oriented partnerships, problem-oriented policing. We've got a really big project internally now around modernising neighbourhoods. Right at the centre of that, I believe, is problem solving, because problem solving happens in our communities every single day by our staff. And so how are we helping our staff in that problem-solving model? How are we giving all of our staff those tools and making them realise that by problem-solving for the shop at the end of the road, for that neighbour dispute, when they're constantly problem-solving, how are we letting them know that actually this is innovation? Innovation isn't some grand concept that only a certain elite within an organisation at a certain grade get. Innovation is what everybody is doing every day in their work, and it's really important that we do that. So first of all, talk about Lancashire Forensic Science Academy. This was my first innovation project. Long story short, we were sat down with the Police and Crime Commissioner, with the Chief Constable, looking at cost-saving initiatives across the organisation, efficiencies and everything else. And we have a department of 103 staff within our Forensic Science department. There is no shying away from the fact that there are cost savings that can be made in certain departments. Some of those are effective, some of those aren't. We have options such as outsourcing, we have options around reducing staff, we have options around, well, we're not going to do that anymore, we're not going to send CSIs there anymore. All of these considerations are taken on a daily basis. What I did was looked at the value of our forensic science service, the value that it offers to the public, this wealth of experience and expertise that we have in that department. Some members of the professionals in that department, forensic scientists, 20, 30 years experience in the field, and where locally we wanted to be and what we wanted to deliver. There is no denying in Lancashire we deliver what we deem to be a gold standard in forensic science. And so we started conversations with local universities, national universities, looked around at good practice, and so came up with the concept of the Lancashire Forensic Science Academy. We ended up partnering with University of Central Lancashire. What we have now is we've had over 500 students come through the academy in the first 2 years. Every single day in Lancashire, there are 4 students going out with our CSIs to crime scenes. Back in the labs, we've got students working in the labs on crime scene investigation. When I say working on, very often they are observing how we do that. And then what they will do is go upstairs in our new £1 million research laboratories and replicate what has just happened downstairs so that they can, under a controlled environment, experience and learn in a very different way than they are able to through the university. We've got CSIs who were operational CSIs. They are now what we deem as tutor CSIs. So they spend all of their time taking the students out to the crime scenes. They do get an opportunity to kind of handpick the jobs that they go to as well, so that it serves the student needs. And we provide, as part of this agreement, a number of hours to the university in lecturing, in teaching, as well as in assisting with research and things like that. What did we get in return? We got a multi-million-pound investment from the university into the organisation, particularly into forensic science. That equates to around £1 million a year, and we're on a 10-year agreement with the university for that. Just a little bit about digital. I've already talked about how that's owned by Chief Inspector Dave Hannon. One of the things we've done with digital is we've run our Switched On campaign, which is the power of digital. So running a number of campaigns internally, teaching our staff around the value of utilising not just digital technology in what they do, but also in terms of digital investigation and the things that they can learn when they're in crime scenes, learn when they go to somebody's house. So this is an example of one of them, Meet Our Newest Recruits. And so turning that around and saying, well, actually, how can these devices help us during investigation? So we've got the example of the Alexa there, the Nest, GPS, sat-nav. We also have, as part of the Lancashire Forensic Science Academy, we now have 2 crime scene houses, one of which is a physical crime scene house and the other is a digital crime scene house. And we're currently in the process of updating some of that so that we can get as many devices in there to start teaching our staff around when you walk into these properties, what is and what isn't talking to the network and how can you get that information out. Just a couple of other examples there of some of the advertising that we do internally with our staff. So a 27-year-old female reports that a former co-worker is stalking her. Where would you look to find the evidence? Just posing some questions to our staff, these nudges to our staff all the time, just keeping them thinking digital at every step. Some of you may have seen Oscar Kilo. This was another one of my projects. It came into innovation originally from funding from Public Health England. Our Chief Constable is the lead. Andy Rhodes is the lead nationally for wellbeing. Public Health England was doing a piece of work with Mr. Rhodes and said, how do we get good practice, best practice out to emergency services, blue light services, around what is happening in the world of wellbeing. So in 2000, I think it was originally 2016, this first came in and we came up with the concept of Oscar Kilo, OK, the whole mental health side of things. And then from there, shortly after, there was a funding announcement from the Home Office around wellbeing. And so we have partnered with the College of Policing and the Home Office. We now have Oscar Kilo, for those who don't know, hosts. We say that Oscar Kilo is the home of evidence-based and best practice for wellbeing across emergency services. And that includes other services such as prison service and NHS now as well. So we have 2 tandem projects that work very closely together. One is the National Police Wellbeing Service, and all of the work in which they do there is hosted on Oscar Kilo, and we work to disseminate that information out to everybody. We also host digitally the Blue Light Wellbeing Framework, and that is a self-assessment for emergency services to look at organisationally how are they delivering well-being, and then they can call upon that evidence that's hosted through Oscar Kilo to start identifying gaps and identify where they need to increase their learning, where they need to increase their interventions in the whole environment of well-being. With those last two examples, the Forensic Science Academy and Oscar Kilo, just on a personal note, I'm having to get used to letting go of things, which is quite difficult. If you work in innovation particularly, you hold an idea, you work to implement it, and then there comes to that point where you have to hand it back over to the business as usual. And so at the moment, I feel very much, just because of these programs coming online, I keep losing all my children. But yeah, getting used to it slowly. A couple of other examples before I finish. We were the first police force to launch the Amazon Alexa skill for policing. Just a brief overview of that. For Father's Day, I got an Amazon Alexa, started playing around with it and thought, why aren't the police on here? Started working with somebody in media and engagement. Took two people about, I would say probably about 10 hours to come up with the actual development program that we now use. What does it do? Contrary to the Daily Mail's report, you can't report crime on there. We don't allow people to do that. However, what we do is we give all of our residents in Lancashire and nationally, you can download it on the Amazon Alexa app. You walk into your kitchen, you say, what's my briefing? And the first briefing you will get is from Lancashire Police, which includes our latest news, our missing people, our wanted people, road traffic accidents, any other information that we want to give to residents. We can pass that out very quickly through the Amazon Alexa. We're developing now for other things such as the Google Home Hubs, Apple, etc. What that did was it opened up a door for Lancashire Constabulary that we didn't have before. I've been very fortunate in being able to go down to Amazon headquarters. This perked their attention, and so we've been working with them on both developing this idea, but also other ideas as well. And nationally now, Amazon are working part of the National Enabling Programme, which is great. And we will start to see a lot more of this kind of stuff. Drones, I touched upon there. Just the thing about innovation and the effectiveness of innovation is making sure that this stuff makes a real difference. I was in a meeting last week where somebody talked about innovation for innovation's sake. We don't want to be doing that, and so that's why it's really important. We talk about drones all the time. We say, oh, great, we've got drones. We wanted to have drones, but we needed to prove why we wanted drones, and then we needed to evaluate whether they were actually going to be any good for us. So through innovation, partnering with the TACOPS, Tactical Operations Team, we were on a 3-month pilot. And very quickly, what we established was there was probably about 3 things that the drone couldn't do that a helicopter could do. So then we started to say, okay, so how do we start to compare the effectiveness of a good drone against the effectiveness of the National Police Air Service? Some startling figures there for you. So during that 3-month period, NPAS attended 16% of the requests that we made for the helicopter. At that same period, the drone attended 71%. They declined 32% of the jobs that we asked them to attend. The Lancs drone declined 4%. This was a collaboration with the fire service. We borrowed their drone. We had no money, so we borrowed their drone to run this 3-month pilot. We also did this with Greater Manchester Police, so we worked with Greater Manchester Police as well on this. And then at the end of it, we came up with our evaluation, and through innovation, we produced our recommendation to the organisation. The drone that we needed to get cost significantly more than one you will buy at Amazon or one you could have bought at Maplin before it shut down. So what did we do? We went to the Police and Crime Commissioner, and through Proceeds of Crime Act, we bought 2 drones, which is quite nice because we've got the criminals paying for the drones. Spent in the region of £100,000 on these 2 drones. But these are the effectiveness that they can deliver compared to something else is outstanding. And so we've now appointed a team, 4 officers, 1 sergeant, a full-time team who are the drone response team in Lancashire. And we're really excited about where we're taking that, because now we are looking for university partners because very much as part of this team, we will have a research and development function to say, how do we continue to make the most out of drone technology? Where can we go with this? If you look across agriculture and places like that, they've got things on the drones that can identify where the ground has been disturbed or relayed over. How useful will that be for police officers? All these types of things that we're starting to explore now. Very quickly, just PDR, one that I'm sure many L&D professionals in the room will know about. We weren't great at PDR. In fact, we were rubbish at it. And HMIC FRS told us that as well in 2016. They said Lancashire doesn't have a consistent process in place for carrying out performance reviews. The constabulary needed to improve the way it manages and develops individual performance. So we did something, but then they came back in 2017 and said it's disappointed that the only limited improvements have been made. There was confusion over the interim PDR process. Managers didn't understand the performance, and also managers had not conducted performance reviews. So again, looked at the market and brought that all online digitally through Calidus. I don't know if many others in the room use Calidus. And so we have designed the system with staff, not for the staff. These were the principles that we had. Use first, elements of compliance later, and it must be a way to listen. There must be a way to listen post-implementation. Once again, this was taken. It wasn't taken out of L&D. This was working with L&D, but we have an organisational development team that's part of the team that I work with, and they led on the implementation of this. So we looked at the pushes and the pulls, so the things that we needed to deliver, the things that we needed the staff to do, and the things that we could offer the staff. Beforehand, we had 12% compliance on our PDR system. This graph shows from 2018 through to last month how many staff are engaged in the process, how many staff have logged on, how many staff have set objectives within their PDR. We're now up to 82% across the whole organisation in terms of PDR. You can see there, potential users, 5,444, that's our staff numbers. District users, so that's the number of users that we have, 4,432. And objectives, the objectives that people are setting themselves to progress their careers, to benchmark themselves across. We've now got over 14,865 objectives set individually by their staff within their PDRs. So a massive shift from where we were 2 years ago to where we are now. Just to sum things up for you, because I'm aware I've gone 2 minutes over, just some key points really, lessons learned. Innovation is not just an idea, but it is where it starts. So we need those ideas. It's really, really important. It's probably the one thing I bang on about most, is we need those ideas from our staff, from our people. We can't have people just sat in a room saying, oh, I know what's best for our staff, I know what's best for our people. We need our people involved in that process. We don't need 100 innovations a year. If I've learned anything over the last couple of years, it is that we can't do everything we would like to do. So we need to ensure that that prioritisation is key, that the prioritisation is delivering projects that are making a difference to our staff. Ideas need a home. So we're working nationally now with the NEP around idea generation, and you talked about 365 before. We're piloting a project in Lancashire around idea generation through 365, also in conversations with the College of Policing around that. And how do we get one place where all of our staff naturally can start to submit their ideas on what will improve their business? We need open innovation. How do we bring people outside of our organisation into that? Loads of problems. We had a conversation at our table before about procurement. There are loads of complications when we start to bring people from outside of our organisation into research, development and change within our organisation. However, lots and lots of other people do it on a daily basis, and they do it really effectively. And I'm talking about Procter & Gamble, Unilever, big companies who rely on people outside of their business to bring those ideas in and to implement that change. And in policing, we have just not there yet. Even with the conversations we had with Amazon, there was a whole stop on things for quite a while because suddenly procurement. Oh, why are we not speaking to Microsoft? Why are we not speaking to Connect? Why are we not speaking to... And so we need to be able to find a way to get these people into that environment, and that's why we call it an open innovation environment. Leadership and engagement is key. That's the final point from me. It is key. I just want to share something with you very quickly, a recent conversation. And this is a bit of a reality check around culture. We all know what we're faced with within our organisations. You mentioned the work that you're doing in Greater Manchester Police with sergeants and inspectors, which is fantastic. Very short Facebook conversation. This isn't a conversation that was had in private. This was an open post on Facebook. First person says, I did 28 years. Not one thing I did in any of that time required any educational qualifications whatsoever. 2 O-levels and a bucket load of common sense, as well as a dash of moral fibre, got me through. This graduate nonsense will just disqualify a large number of potentially great cops. Beggars belief, rant over, Merry Christmas. Somebody else came on and said, I agree with every word. Most of these graduates probably think they've lived a bit because they smoked a bit of weed at college, but when they are getting an ass whooping from some massive dude who likes beating his wife, they may wonder why he didn't become a dentist. Next person comes on, short comment, bag of bollocks. Thank you. And the last person comes along and says, you spelt bollocks wrong. I guess you didn't get a degree in English literature or creative dance. You ain't coming in. Quite a funny conversation. I went through that conversation. 3 inspectors and 1 sergeant. Now, is that a reality check for us, not just within policing, but for our partners as well, around the challenge that we have? If we are putting the faith in our leaders, our first-line managers, to ensure that this stuff works, to ensure that it's going to be implemented effectively, there is still a hell of a lot of work that we all need to do within our organisations to ensure that we've got the organisation and our people on board for this to happen, and we haven't got there yet. I hope some of you have found that useful. I hope there's some bits and pieces that you can take back into learning and development. And if there's any questions, I will take a couple of questions if very, very quickly. But please catch me at the coffee break anyway. Thank you.